what does the United States need rescuing from?
It needs rescuing from the illusion that a great power such as ours can stand by while violence and massed armies and state-on-state violence change the borders of Europe and suffer no consequences. The Trump administration is very, very reluctant because of a number of reasons, one of them being the ambivalence, to put it mildly, of the MAGA base about Ukraine, very reluctant to take leadership in this. And so now Europe has to begin to act like a united continent. You know, it's been said for a long time, Leland, that Europe has always been a geographical expression and has struggled to be a political expression. Now's the time it must become a political expression and take charge of its own security.
Is it perhaps to be said a good thing that Europe, that so badly wants to be a political expression, that so badly wants to free itself, they say, from the United States because they have a very different view of individual liberty and individual rights than we do, that it's about time they take their own responsibility, or at least the lead, and it's a good thing that Donald Trump is forcing that?
That's a sensible argument, and we'll see if it plays out. The European Union, Leland, has a gross domestic product 10 times larger than Russia's. It has 3 times Russia's population. There's no question that it has the means. The question is, does it have the will? Well, I'd better find it pretty soon, because Mr. Trump, it seems to me, who's never been famous for his patience, is very apt to, once he realizes that he has no purchase whatever, no leverage whatever with Mr. Putin, will be tempted to walk away, at which point we're going to see something really interesting, a major European conflict where the United States is irrelevant. The United States was crucial to settling the First World War, crucial at Potsdam and Yalta before that, settling the Second World War, crucial to settling the wars that broke out when Yugoslavia disintegrated. This may be the first time since the 20th century that we have a crisis in Europe to which the United States is largely irrelevant.
I would argue perhaps we are not irrelevant, but choosing to take a step back. There may be a difference. You may argue that it's a difference without a distinction. But I think we look at it a little bit differently in that you think about Putin's invasion of Ukraine in 2014. I was there. It was Democrats in charge with Barack Obama. There was not some big call for America and others to be involved. In fact, Obama sort of met it with a shrug, if you will, and suddenly now the alarm bells are ringing loud that now America must step in. Even Joe Biden wasn't called to do as much as Donald Trump is being called upon to do. Is there an unfair standard to this?
Well, maybe. You're quite right, Leland, to call attention to the fact that this is not the 3rd year of the war of Russia against Ukraine. It's the 11th year. It began in 2014 with the seizure of Ukraine and the beginning of the Little Green Men and the gray area wars in some provinces of the remainder of Ukraine. But what has not changed, and now seems more urgent, is that Russia's aims are quite clear. It wasn't Crimea, it's not this or that region of Ukraine. It is to extinguish Ukrainian statehood. So it seems to me the urgency that you're now rightly hearing is in fact a recognition, belated, that this is a really stark choice for Europe, something unlike anything since 1945.
Since 1945, before 1945, was obviously the rise of Adolf Hitler. There was Chamberlain at Munich, the UK Prime Minister's famous appeasement of Adolf Hitler, and then Churchill, one of your heroes, one of mine, came to power, to leadership, and in your column you quote his message of June 40th, 1940. Take a listen.
We shall defend our island, whatever the cost may be. We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender.
Why should America be stronger about fighting Vladimir Putin than Europe collectively is right now? Why is it upon President Trump, in your mind and so many others, to stand stronger than Europe is willing to stand, as you point out, for its own safety and security?
Well, first, let's not prejudge what Europe is going to do. Germany is now has the fourth largest defense budget in the world. And Britain and France, two nuclear powers, have signed a new agreement to extend their nuclear umbrella, if you will, to European security, not just their national securities. So I think it's arguable, Leland, that Europe is stepping up considerably. But beyond this, there is no reason to believe that Ukraine is the last morsel on the plate for Mr. Putin. He is very apt to turn his attentions to Eastern Europe, to Hungary, where there's a regime that is, I think it's fair to say, sympathetic to Putin, Mr. Erdogan's Hungarian government. There are the three Baltic states who are members of NATO, and Article 5 still exists. An attack on one is an attack on the NATO alliance. So we're playing with fire here. And there's not just smoke, there's actual fire.
Fair enough. And I think you rightly point out the dangers and the fire that exists. Bill O'Reilly on the program last night made the point that Donald Trump should be given time to maneuver when I argued that sanctions must come now, that we must speak Vladimir Putin's language because of the risks of a sociopath, as Vladimir Putin is, with the world's largest nuclear arsenal. Take a listen.
Putin would, in my opinion, use nukes. He used them. And when you're dealing with a guy like that, when life matters not at all, life doesn't matter one bit to him, you got to be very, very careful and methodical.
Given that there is now conversation, there is now negotiation, which I think is a good thing because we're at least talking about ending this war rather than just continuing the funding of a war that neither side can win. Is Trump not entitled to more time?
Well, speaking of time, he said 50 days, Mr. Putin, or there'll be severe consequences. Then he said 10 days, Mr. Putin, or there'll be severe consequences. The 10 days came and went, no consequences. Now he says, if we don't make progress, and he says, it's over to you to do this, Mr. Zelensky, Putin will find himself in a rough situation. Leland, there comes a point when people just aren't going to take seriously what he says. Remember, Leland, how there was a kind of alarm and convulsion here in Washington when Barack Obama said, I'm drawing a red line about the use of chemical weapons in Syria. Syria then did what he had said was crossing a red line, and nothing happened. It is serious business when a great nation loses its credibility, and I think we're in the process of doing that.
Boy, I remember being a young foreign correspondent in Israel when that happened. And after Barack Obama made his speech saying, we're going to back off effectively, and even though the red line was crossed, now I'm going to go to Congress and dithered, I had a very senior member of the Israeli government call me after that, and he said, well, now we are on our own after the United States had dithered. That said, I think we can all agree that peace, the prospect of it, and a negotiated settlement to this war is an important one. You're not on the side of saying that Ukraine must be made whole again, that Vladimir Putin probably is going to end up with some part of Ukraine if he is going to make a deal, right?
I see no evidence, Leland, none, zero, that Mr. Putin wants a negotiated end to this war. I think he wants to play this process out, let his summer offensive roll, at which point he will say, as he has said, as a version of the Brezhnev doctrine, Brezhnev said, wherever socialism has been planted, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Poland, there it must stay. They've updated that to say wherever Russian boots have been on the ground, that ground now belongs to Russia. What, Leland, is there to negotiate about when the other party simply wants to get not to yes, they want to get to Kyiv?
Well, to Kyiv, and I think you're making the point they want to get beyond Kyiv, which is Vladimir Putin's stated goal, to reconstitute, as you point out, the Soviet Union. Mr. Will, it's always good to see you, sir. I know your vacation is coming up. We'll see you after Labor Day.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.